Welcome and good afternoon to our World Leaders to the third session of our Inner Core series. It's been said that the most powerful leadership tool that one has is our own personal example. This is the basis of the Inner Core series, where we aim to engage, empower, and equip you to build well-being in your teams. On Tuesday in our course series session, we placed our focus on mindfulness and its importance for all of us, both at home and in the workplace. We looked at how the conscious and subconscious mind works and how we can be aware of both to be mindful in our daily lives. And most importantly, we learned about the importance of taking the time out to just breathe. Today, we continue that discussion and put the focus on you as leaders and how you can utilize mindfulness by becoming more self-aware and creating healthy boundaries to better help you to lead your teams. If you were able to join us this past Tuesday at our course series session, you may have recognized our today's speaker, Dr. Natasha Winkler-Titus. She's an established work psychologist with more than 25 years of experience in people leadership, executive development, and management consulting. Natasha was awarded the 2019 Organizational Psychology Practitioner of the Year in South Africa. She believes in using her influence and platform to empower others towards significance and drive societal change and transformation. Natasha is the founder and curator of Signifier, a body of associates aiming to make change significant for individuals and organizations. She's also a full-time faculty member of the University of Stellenbosch Business School, teaching and researching in leadership and organizational behavior. Ensuring her societal impact towards future significance, Natasha currently serves as the immediate past president for the Society of Industrial and Organizational Psychologists in South Africa, supervising and mentoring intern psychologists, and serves as an international expert panelist for the Center for Global Inclusion. Assisting Natasha in facilitating today's session, you may recognize Marina Pretorius, who's been in our other course series session, in a course series session. Marina is highly experienced industrial and organizational psychologist with a demonstrated history of working in the human resource industry and consulting. She's currently consulting for Broad Property Group and working closely in partnership with the Group Human Capital team and fast becoming an integral part of our team. The format of today's session, like the previous ones, will include breakout sessions that will allow us to all immerse ourselves in the topic and ultimately strengthen our skills that will build up our leadership capabilities. Now, without further ado, ladies, thank you for being with us today, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Andile. Let me just check my sound is on. Yes. Thank you, Andile, and Marina, for inviting me into this exciting series and intervention that you're running. I thoroughly enjoyed spending time with the employees on Tuesday, and I'm hoping to build on where we left off on Tuesday. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the conscious self and how do you become more aware. But we are going to make it a lot more pragmatic, having discussions around that, doing some exercises. And then we're also going to take it to a team level and an organizational level. So just a few pointers on my side. It is a very small, intimate group. We want it to be very engaging. So I do encourage you to keep your videos on as much as possible, especially when you're speaking. So when we're going out into the smaller breakouts, it would be nice if you have your videos on to engage with each other. By now, hopefully, you know the drill with Zoom. You know we use the chat function. Feel free to engage, add some commentary. And we will also use the polling. I believe you have done Menti polling. So we encourage you in your small groups to give us feedback through Menti so that we can all learn in a collaborative way. The session outline, as Andile has said, and don't keep me too much to time, I'm a very flexible facilitator. But in essence, we've got 90 minutes together. It's going to be very applied. There will be a bit of a presentation. I will share some stuff with you. Hopefully it'll be more in the story format, but there will be a lot more working going on. Okay, so without further ado, let's jump into it. I hope most of you were able to tune in on Tuesday, but if you were not able to, maybe some of you can think back to last year when you had the Mind Up series with Malcolm, and I did a very similar exercise on breathing. So I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but I'm just going to rehash and recap a little bit to bring that into the conversation. And so firstly, if you can recall, the key point of Tuesday was that breathing is critical for effective functioning. So just to make sure we are all aligned, we are all centered, I'm going to invite you to just take a few deep breaths with me to center yourself and get into the conversation. So usually for me personally, taking a few Victoria's breaths helped to steady and to calm myself. So the first part requires you to hear a whispering sound at the back of your throat. So with an open mind and an open mouth, join me as we take one deep breath in and out. The second part is to breathe in through an open mouth and then seal your lips and then listen to that wisp sound at the back of your throat. So breathe in and out. And the final stage is just to breathe in and exhale through sealed lips. And keep listening to that little hissing sound at the back. So let's take one deep breath in together and out. Now remember also to keep your feet planted on the floor. It always helps to ground. I always tell people, in your mind's eye, see little roots going into the floor, through the tile, through the carpet, wherever you're sitting. If you're sitting outside, through the grass, and just center yourself. And just give yourself this gift of spending the time together and focusing on you. Now, also remember, some of the things we took away on Tuesday is that the brain and the body is connected, and your brain is always going. And remember, the brain is also a muscle, so it can be reconfigured. Your brain is not static, and it doesn't stay the same throughout your life. And this is called neuroplasticity. Just a reminder, are you still breathing? So the breathing, and when we breathe properly, it allows the oxygen to flow between your brain and your body and regulate your nervous system. Okay, so now let's get into let's graduate you from just breathing and get into a deeper level of consciousness. Okay, so talking about conscious self and the subconscious self, what is that? Okay, so it is only when you are conscious and you're able to see yourself through a process of self-awareness that can suddenly reveal so many of the previously hidden forces constantly at work, molding you, manipulating you, and holding you back. Because if you intuitively know what you need to do to change for the better, why don't you? It's not a moral failure. It's because you are not conscious and you are usually stuck in autopilot or a state of knee-jerk automatic behaviors. Maybe this situation sounds familiar. In the days when we were still traveling to office, you head to work the same time every day, and the routine to get out of the door is more or less memorized. You shower, you brush your teeth, make coffee, eat breakfast, get dressed, drive to work, and so on. You barely have to think consciously about doing any of these things because you've done them so frequently, and now your mind is on autopilot. Have you ever traveled to your place of work and wondered, how did I get here? So when we're running on autopilot, it makes us feel stuck because it comes from a reactive space called the subconscious. a primitive part of our mind that stores every experience. This isn't just a storehouse of facts and figures. It's emotional, it's reactive, it's irrational. Every moment of every day, the subconscious mind is shaping the way we see the world. It is the primary driver of most of our often automatic behaviors. Anytime we are not fully conscious, our subconscious mind is hard at work being us. So how we think, how we speak, how we respond, all of this comes from the subconscious part of ourselves that has been conditioned by our thoughts, patterns, and beliefs that became ingrained in our childhood through a process called conditioning. Running on autopilot is a function of our conditioning. Most of us are stuck in subconscious programming. In fact, some brain scans reveal that we operate only 5% of the day in a conscious state. The rest of the time, we are in subconscious automatic mode. This means that we are making active choices during only a small sliver of the day and letting our subconscious run the show. The conscious and subconscious self is important because organizational behavior and an employee's performance, including your performance, depends on three aspects. And the way we make decisions depends on all of these. Emotions. What are emotions? How do we manage them in the workplace? How do we apply them? How do we use them? What's the function of emotions? What is emotional intelligence and how does it impact on everything we do? The significance of personality, the relationship between personality and behavior and the work that you do and the performance you deliver. Discussion on personality traits as a categorizer and a describer of people. And then lastly, perceptions and individual decision-making, judging others and forming perceptions, common bias and errors that filters through in decision-making. And these are important because most of the time in organizations, we get so fixated on the end result. In role, what is your it? In HR, it could be delivering a service, recruiting that person. In property management, it is about a happy and satisfied client. You're servicing their contract appropriately. It could be a sale of a property, but what is that result? And oftentimes we focus on that end result. However, we forget that the end result is accumulation of performance and the performance from every single individual in your organization. Andile, I'm just going to ask you to have a look at the oh, sorry, I see it's Marina in the chat. I'm seeing the chat going up, and so if there's a question,
I've also got an eye on the chat as well.
Okay, thank you. So the results is accumulation of every single person's performance, but the performance is informed by individual behavior. So what is it we do? What do we say? What are our actions? And that behavior is made up of 4 dimensions. Your attitude or how willing you are to perform, your ability, how enabled you are, as well as the dynamics around you. And all of those things, so your attitude comes from the intentions. Why are you working? Why am I here? The level of commitment that each individual brings. The loyalty, not only to your job, your purpose, your team, but also the brand, the organization, and its stakeholders. The attitude we come in, and unfortunately our attitudes change probably quicker than we do our underwear. So people's attitudes and how they come into the space of working, how motivated, how engaged, our values, our beliefs. Ability is not just your qualifications on your CV, it is your competence, your skill, and your capability. How do you apply what you know? The relationships that you formed to enable you to apply and to deliver on what you need to do. The networks in the organization and beyond that help people deliver what they do. The experience, the energy, and the health that we bring to it. But there's more. How enabled are we? Are we empowered? Do we have the authority to make a decision when we need to make a decision? Are we clear on what those boundaries are? Do we keep people accountable for managing within their boundaries? What type of support are we giving? Are people clear on their roles and their tasks? And do they have the resources necessary to do what we expect of them? And then when you put all these little individuals together, we have dynamics, because we have different personalities in a different context, different identities in a different space, different emotions. There might be power and politics at play. So all of those dynamics play into. So when we think about that output, that final result, that closing of the deal, we have to remember that all these things behind the scenes are informing. And oftentimes, those type of things are sitting in our subconscious. It's autopilot. We don't even think about it. So every time you see a red explosion, it denotes a complex and unpredicted interaction and outcomes. None of the drivers are visible. Some are even more unpredictable and irrational drivers. So these are all either performance enablers or distractors. It all depends on how you use them in the context. And to top it off, beyond that, we also have individual and team dynamics. So beyond the individual and team dynamics and interactions, there's also the organization as a system. And an organization as a system has hardware and hardware, or culture, as we say. The hardware is, what are your policies? What's your processes? What's the systems? What are the structures and the strategies and the resources we have? And remember, we went from a normal organizational context with processes and practices and systems, and then we were all shut in, and suddenly virtual work or remote work became the norm. And to what extent did we adjust our practices, our processes, our policies around that? And going forward, what are our considerations around that? Are we just merely going back into the old, or are we going to adjust the operating model? And around that as well, and informing that, is the culture, the unwritten rules, the norms and the values we project, the team spirit and the culture, and the climate, the relationships and potential conflict. So all of these things together lead to a result. Unfortunately, a lot of the times, most of these things are sitting in our subconscious personally, but also our subconscious of the system as a collective. So a mature or immature type of leadership behavior stems from habits of thought that we have formed through our life experiences, and which we then use to organize our personal identity, who we are. So most of the time, and you'll see the number there, what you see, the immediately manifested behavior, the words that come out in writing or in speaking, it's usually 10% of who I am. My actions, my behavior, my words is informed by my thinking. What are these habits? What are these subconscious knee-jerk reaction, autopilot things that's in my mind that happens? That is informed, that then is informed by even deeper set of your values, your upbringing, experiences that come from the past. And oftentimes, those things are lying so deep in our subconscious that we don't even realize to what extent it's influencing our behavior. So I'm going to share a story with you about how it is possible to reauthor, to rewire your mind, to reauthor your story. So I'm going to share a story around the power of belief. And bear with me, some of these things I'm just going to read because I don't want to get the facts wrong. So in 1979, a Harvard psychologist, Alan Langer, recruited two groups of elderly men from a nursing home in the Boston area to live for a week long in a monastery in New Hampshire. And they took part in a study on the power of belief and its effect on aging. The first group of men were told to live as if the clock turned back 20 years overnight. They were to live as younger versions of themselves. The second group would remain in the present, but would be urged to reminisce about the past. Everything in the first group's area of the monastery, which had been decorated for the study, supported this transformation. The furniture was mid-century modern. There were issues of Life magazine and Saturday Night Post were scattered around, things that were prominent for them when they were younger men. They were encouraged to discuss events from that time, like the launch of the first satellite and Fidel Castro's rise in Cuba, etc., and also the fears that they had. All the mirrors were removed, and it was replaced by photographs of the men 20 years earlier. The study lasted only a week, but the changes in the men experience were astounding. Both groups showed vast improvements in every measure, from the physical to the cognitive and emotional. All of the men were more flexible, they stooped less, they even appeared healthier looking. But the changes ran even deeper than the physical. And it was profound for those who inhabited the environment in their younger selves. 63% of them demonstrated immeasurably higher intelligence scores after only 1 week, compared to 44% in the other group. Across the board, all of the men in the first group reported improvements in all 5 senses, from an ability to taste more flavors in food to better hearing and vision. I'm sharing this study because it shows the awesome power of our thoughts, which can influence us in many ways, for better or for worse. That these remarkable changes happened in a group of older population is even more significant, because typically we would find with age comes more resistance to change. Instead of fixating on negative thoughts, and studies have shown that 70% of time we spend on negative thoughts and on things that ultimately never happens. I want you to try and witness your body if you start shifting your thinking and your thought patterns, and you become more aware of how your mind is processing certain information. I want you to become more aware of your body sensations and what you feel when you're threatened, when you have negative thoughts. I want you to become more conscious. Do you see yourself growing defensive with tightened shoulders, jaw muscles? When you FaceTime with maybe your mother or your mother-in-law or your boss, I want you to witness and become more conscious of these things without judging yourself. Just be more aware of it. Because the path to learning yourself more is to spend more time with yourself, to get to know yourself better, to understand what's happening with you. Even in those dark places, some of us don't even want to go to those dark places. And the other element of that is, to begin this type of work, we must be in an environment that you can consider safe and supportive. We cannot become conscious in a hostile environment, especially in the beginning. So we need to create a place where it'll be okay to let your guard down and just be yourself. So we're going to put this to practice a little bit, and I'm going to invite Andile. Andile, if you don't mind to just join me.
Not at all, I'm here.
So Andile and I are going to do a little bit of a role play. I'm going to ask her a few questions. I want you to just listen how I ask the questions. Then we're going to break you in pairs. So you're going to be in a breakout room where there's only 2 of you. And I want you to mimic what we did. So one person can ask the questions and another person can respond. It is an exercise that requires a little bit of vulnerability. So if you're not feeling comfortable, that's also okay. What we want you then to do in the 10 minutes is just have a conversation between each other around these aspects. But let's give it a trial run, Andile, if you could just go with me. So, Andile,
Natasha?
think of a critical incident you experienced recently. A critical incident is an event that's not regular, that's not in your regular rhythm, that either makes you feel a little uncomfortable or it makes you think afterwards. So it's something that stands out.
Interesting. Critical incident that's happened in the workplace. I've recently had to present to our group CFO, as with my HR director in tow. We had to review supplier suitability for quite an important project for the group. So that was a critical incident. Are the other questions going to come up so we can all see them, Natasha?
Yep.
Great.
So why does this stand out for you, Andile?
Stands out for me because I had to motivate for something that was quite important, on a subject matter that I would say I'm not an expert in, but I prepared for it, but I wasn't a subject matter expert at all. So it stands out for me for that reason.
What feelings did you feel?
Before the meeting, I'd probably say a bit nervous, a little bit of anxiety on how I was going to come across. Was I going to be credible and convincing? Those are some of the thoughts that were going through my mind.
During the meeting?
During the meeting, I think I came across strongly. Like I said, I was prepared, but I definitely had voices in my head where I was questioning how I was coming across, and I would speak and I would then immediately have a voice in my head saying, is this convincing? Is this coming across like it should be? And perhaps I'm not the subject matter expert and it is coming through.
How did you feel afterwards?
After the meeting, because it was a successful meeting, I felt great. I realized that I was in a room with a colleague that valued my input, and it was a positive meeting. So I felt good after the meeting.
How did you feel in your body?
In my body, definitely during the meeting, I would have heart palpitations. I probably said my heart rate was probably going a bit fast in instances where I would be asked a difficult question, and just slight nervousness. So mine shows up with just shaky hands. So it was virtual, thank goodness. So no one could see my shaky hands, but yeah, probably just a bit uneasy and nervous laughter probably as well.
How did you respond?
In the meeting?
Mm-hmm.
I responded, I think I showed up, like I said earlier. So I showed up, I was present. So it wasn't visible, but I was definitely, like I said, in my head.
Okay. Now, you performed in the meeting, you did what you set out to do, but there was a different script in your head versus what was coming out. What is your truth of the events?
My truth of the events was that like I said earlier, that I presented. There was a task that was at hand, and it was completed successfully, and it went really well. So, I probably took away from it that the fact that I had a fear of failure, I had self-doubt, and probably over-prepared because of that fear of failure and self-doubt was unnecessary. I didn't have to prepare as hard as I did. Those are some of the things that I took away. And just creating that unnecessary internal anxiety about something where I could have just gone in without a preconceived idea of how I would be perceived in that moment.
Mm-hmm. So that is your truth, and an alternative truth could have been, if I wasn't as anxious or self-doubt in myself, I wouldn't have had that anxiety. I could have been more clear-headed to have a more open conversation and be open to hearing what the other parties were saying.
100%.
How do you potentially get in your own way due to beliefs and or thinking?
Overthinking, just preempting how a situation is going to play out. So yes, I've prepared for the meeting, but this is potentially how the person I'm going to be meeting is going to react to what I'm going to be saying. This is how the meeting is going to turn out. And then I've caught myself in this internal web of doubt and self-doubt. So I then have the nerves and the heart palpitations that then come with that.
Thank you so much. And thanks, Andile, for making yourself vulnerable and sharing that critical incident. And so that's just an illustration of what usually happens to us. There's something that is playing out here, but then there's an alternative story that's running through our subconscious mind. Sometimes it comes to the conscious and just through our bodies as well. And if we become more aware of what's happening to us, we can be more proactive around, I know it's just my insecurities coming through. I know I have self-doubt, so let me speak into that and go into the meeting in a different way. So I'm going to ask Josh, if we can do 6 minutes, because we'll only share one story. So if you can open up the breakout rooms, and we're going to have 6 to 7 minutes, ladies and gentlemen, just to do the same exercise. So the questions will be in the chat for you, and you can also take a screenshot. Okay, so it's very difficult to be vulnerable. And that's what becoming conscious asks of us. It asks us to be vulnerable and to be present in the moment. So quickly, just to pull it all together, why do we need more consciousness? What's the impact of consciousness to help you manage your personal boundaries? And that was on Tuesday, that was a lot of the feedback that came through, is we just don't know how to shut down. I spend 150% in my head on role, on work stuff. How do I shut down? So how do we, how can we alleviate or elevate consciousness so that we can manage our boundaries more? Okay, so in relationships, having a healthy personal boundary means that we take responsibility for our own actions and emotions, while not taking responsibility for the other person's actions and emotions. It means we understand that adults can handle you not taking their burdens on yourself, and you can still be a good person if you say no. At work, having personal boundaries mean taking responsibility for your own work and results, and working in a way that helps others to solve their own problems instead of taking responsibility for them. Boundaries lead to confidence, emotional stability, and reduced anxiety because they give you a sense of control. Psychology research is clear that one of the fastest route to depression is when you're responsible for something that you don't feel you have control over. Having poor boundaries often means you're responsive to other people's needs and expectations at the expense of your own. This leads to a loss of control over your own work and results, which is not only depressing, but it leads to even worse control over your boundaries. And that not only leads to more abuse of your boundaries, but also increases people's expectations that you would always be available on demand for them, no matter the cost to you. The key difference between boundaries and barriers is that a barrier cuts off communication. It cuts off negotiation. It makes clear that you are not on the same team. The Berlin Wall, for example, was a barrier. On the other hand, people can stand on their own side of a boundary and still have a conversation. They can shake hands over a line or even offer to come over to the line to help. Each party takes responsibility for what's on their side of the boundary, and they respect the line, but it's in the service of working together, not avoiding each other. Boundaries ultimately are about helping you to get the work you need to get done. You can't set effective boundaries with others if you can't articulate the best way to work with yourself. So step back and identify the following. What's the most important work you are responsible for? What challenges are you up against? What is the most likely to get in the way of you doing the best work? What information do you need in order to do your best work? When do you need uninterrupted time in order to do your best work. What's your optimal work style? When do you do your clearest thinking? When are you best able to get into flow? It pays to personally ask the people you work with the same question. Ask your team members, what's the most important work you're responsible for? What challenges are you up to? What information do you need? What are the best communication channels? When do you have your clearest thinking? When you communicate your boundaries with people, it's helpful to frame them in terms of your desire for the greater good, the team's overall success. It's easier for colleagues to hear the word no when it's framed by the big picture for the team. And it's best to set boundaries as if, then that agreements. In other words, boundaries are like a promise you make to each other. For example, if you promise to call me, promise to call me without warning if it's an emergency, then I promise to always pick up, unless I'm dealing with something else in that emergency. In that case, I will call you back immediately. If you see that my status is on Teams, my status is red, the dot is red, it means I'm probably heads down working on something important. So if you send me a chat message, I'll probably not respond immediately, but I'll promise you I will check back with you. If you get me your first draft on this day, I promise I'll get your feedback on that day. So it's about negotiating our boundaries and our way of working. One of the biggest ways we fall prey to short-term thinking is when it comes to helping others is fear. We have a fear of disappointing people, a fear of seeming or coming across as selfish, a fear that the other person will fail if we don't save them, and so on and so on and so on. So it's at the root of it is fear. And you may ask me, but what if other people don't respect my boundaries? Then I'll tell you that whole story all over again. You have to put in the work. You have to build the relationship and invest in the relationship to negotiate the boundaries, to get to know each other and understand each other, and do all of this within the bigger picture of what needs to be done. So just a few tips on how do you set good boundaries, especially when you're working from home or remotely. A few ideas that we've come across is create a dedicated workspace. It is very difficult with us moving from working from home and living here, and there's no boundary between when are we doing life and when are we doing work. So if you can create a space, doesn't have to be an office, but just a chair, and say, if mommy is sitting in her mommy chair now, it means she's working. So create a dedicated space so that you can physically check out of that space. Drink up, that's a funny way. You know, when we're all in the office, we've got the water cooler moment where everybody meets up in the kitchen or around the water cooler, and that's really where all the gossip and where the chatter goes on. So try and mimic that. Firstly, two things: water cooler, keep dehydrated, drink a lot of water when you're at home as well. But also create that space. Don't let every hookup just be a meeting or about work things. Have a coffee date where you sit in your garden and just catch up with work colleagues. So create those spaces. Take a lunch break. I just got off another session with my own colleagues at the USB, and one of the things I tell them is I have to teach them how to take proper leave, because they are on holiday, they're in the Kruger, and then they respond to my mails. Like, do you not know how to switch off? So make sure you have those built-in breaks. Have your like you would have had if you were in the office. When you are off, be off, shut down. Do not check your mail. Do not have pings coming on your watch or on your phone. Be properly off. When you are on sick leave, we have to be on, if we're sick, we have to be on sick leave. Just because you're working from home doesn't mean I can carry on working. Set your hours. The romantic side of working remotely or working from home is that we can be flexible. We can work anytime that suits us, which is good. So if you need to have children time during the afternoon, you might then decide to spend an hour additionally at night. That is okay. But you have to have time. Set your hours and stay within that where you shut down. There's no point shutting down the laptop at 6, do family time, and then at 9 o'clock do mails or read a report again. Because by the time you want to go sleep, your mind is way too busy to really shut down. Fake a commute, change gears. If you, from work mode to personal mode, have a little ritual. I always say I envy parents, because the mere act of doing stuff with your kids or doing homework, it takes your mind to a total different place. So it forces you to disconnect and change gears. I don't have kids, so I have to I go and borrow kids to disconnect and change gears. Practice saying no. So the rules I gave you around boundaries, build a relationship and start understanding how am I managing my own boundaries. Find your own work rituals, what works for you, how can you negotiate that with your team, and how can you all find each other and put clothes on. It's very important. We're very comfortable. We can put our slippers and our tights because nobody can see below this part. But just the mere fact of having proper shoes on put me mentally in a different state of mind altogether. So don't get comfortable, put your clothes on and as if you're going into corporate mode. So we are going to go into a breakout now with everything that we've taken in so far. I invite you to use the Menti platform again so that we can share and learn from each other. So if you can just take a screenshot of this as well. We're going to open the breakout rooms for 15 minutes. And in your groups, just discuss these 3 questions. First of all, what stood out for you at a personal level? How do you shut down in a remote or hybrid type of environment? And are there any tools or tactics that helps you to be mindful and get in a place of mindfulness, and share that in your groups? And we'd like you to capture that while you're having a discussion, capture it on Menti as well, so that we can learn as a group together. So I'm just going to ask Josh again to open the rooms.
So I just quickly wanted to show everyone what some of the responses was in the Menti, and I think as always it's always helpful to see that we do this with each other and we do similar things. So you can still put on actions. Some people said go for a walk. I actually shut off at 4 o'clock, so there's a specific timeline. Some people said they don't shut off, which we hope after this session you will have more practical tips that you can actually implement. I thought this one was very nice, to spend the last 15 minutes of the day mapping the next day. So to really finish off this day by looking forward to the next day, but then you're closing off and then you're also preparing for the next day. Another good thing is to just be mindful and not get overwhelmed by work, and to stay in the present, right? Get lost in a series or a good novel. I think we've all become professional series watchers for the last year. And then we also see the splitting the home and work life. Prioritizing emails will allow for more time to sort through what needs to be actioned. And very important, work will never be done. Work takes up the time that you make available to it. So yes, this person also has dedicated workspace, have to take a dedicated break, start dinner and have a glass of wine. That is a very practical tactic to use. Run, walk. So I think we see here various tactics and things that people do to shut down and make it very practical for themselves. Tools and tactics that people already use to optimize breathing. I think we've been hearing about the breathing, the morning meditations, but yeah, also still struggling to really find the balance in doing these things. I can just say from my side that when I listen to these talks, often I think, oh yeah, it's good, I'm going to make the list. But it's really when you start doing it that it becomes part of you, and that you can that you can make it work for you, and have the impact that you want it to have. So thanks, Natasha. Back to you then.
Thanks, Marina. And yeah, I do. Can I share? Oops. I do want to, first of all, just on Mentimeter, remember to also go to next, because there's always a second question. So sometimes we forget about the next button, which is the gray one. Then the big thing for me, and that's why I wanted you to practice that exercise with each other around going beneath the surface, try to get to your subconscious, because it's sometimes easy to do things in an artificial way to shut down. I go for a run, I switch off the laptop and put it away in a cupboard. It's locked, it's gone. But it's not as easy to shut down the head. You can cook dinner and still be in work mode and still have your, so you really have to learn to shut down in your head. I have this little exercise I do with people. I said, even washing dishes can be a mindful, but not packing the dishwasher, proper washing dishes with your hands can be an exercise in mindfulness. But in that moment, think about the water, feel the water between your fingers, use this spongy, feel every sensation. That forces you to be mindful. So you have to practice. Remember, I said we are not well practiced in this. It's not easy. We stay there in the conscious level, and all these things sit in the subconscious. So you have to get to the root. If you can't shut down, sometimes it's not just about having too much work. You also have to understand, why am I not shutting down? Is it because I'm anxious for tomorrow? Is it because I'm anxious for what I've not completed? And then why am I anxious? So ask yourself, why? 5 questions of why to get to the root of what is stopping you from shutting down completely. So the last area that we're going to focus on, let me just share my screen again. We're going to take everything basically that we've done and just apply it to us as leader. So how do you lead from a space of consciousness? And the first thing I want to tell you is no different to doing your own consciousness work. So you have to have self-awareness to manage yourself, to be able to engage others, and then to be able to engage a team towards more success and more efficiency. So everything that we've just been applying and thinking about at the individual level, you have to encourage your team to do it for themselves. And then you have to build the team to understand where we are. So how do we apply everything that we've just taken for ourselves to help our team members get more perspective, to identify patterns and behaviors where our team might get unstuck? So if you see a certain behavior, spend the time, ask the 5 why questions. Why are you doing that? Why are you sending me a mail at 9 o'clock at night? Why are you opening my mail on the weekend? And understand what sits behind that. Create a safe space, no judgment. We all have our own baggage, our own reasons. So the safest space to be mindful is when there's no judgment, that it's okay to say, this is what's going on. And then how do you navigate and negotiate healthy boundaries? And within the team, remember to get to alignment of our team and to get to a level of maturity. And that is not just within our own team, but how do we as a leadership team create the system and environment, create a culture and role where we can have people that are mindful, that have people that are well nurtured and engaged, and people that can shut down and that can have a good work-life integration. Is to get to know each other, understand your team's mindset, not just their behavior, show respect, and utilize and understand each other's strengths and weaknesses, and how can we harness that and how can we pull that together. So we're going to do another 15-minute small group discussion, and in your small group, same exercise, there's a new Menti code. For 10 minutes this time, if you can go into small groups and answer those two groups. As a leadership, how do you build the BROL culture, whether you are working remotely or in a hybrid way? Remember, even in when you go back to the office, you will still have colleagues that work in different locations. So how do we, what systems, what processes, or what can we put in place to help people stay connected, but also create a culture that supports mindfulness and managing time boundaries? Okay, if you can take a screenshot of the Menti code and the questions, and then Josh will put us into small groups again for 10 minutes.
Okay, welcome back, everyone. I hope you managed to share some very practical examples from what we can see here in the Menti poll. I think if I can see one good theme that is coming through from a lot of people is that it goes back to setting up healthy boundaries. Boundaries are coming through very strongly, even in practical suggestions like declaring a 1 day an admin or a no meetings day, as a way of staying connected, but also shutting down while we are in a remote work context. Respecting working hours and creating new routines around that, I think is something that a team can very easily do in a small setup. So as leaders, we really want to challenge you to think about these things, not just as, you know, ideas, but as something that you can actually make very practical. Make the team aware via weekly meetings on all staff commitments for the week, including personal commitments. So yes, to become a bit more open on what are also our personal commitments. In our group, we were 2 moms that had to pick up children throughout the day, during the middle of the day. So lunch hour has now become picking up and dropping off kids. Yes, very, very important to have respect for each other's time and declare there's no meeting periods. And just avoiding the emails. Clarity and detail on the request will allow tasks to be completed quicker. So very important. Boundaries came out strongly in how we stay connected, but shut down as well. The tools that we can use to optimize this boundary management, I think it's very important. It starts with time management. It starts with what do we allocate our time to, and do we allow for enough time to allow ourselves to switch off and focus on the work that we need to do by the time we do. Teach people the rules of the virtual world. I'd love for you to put in the chat, what are those rules of the virtual world? What are the rules that in BROL you feel is working or maybe is not working that well? It's a very important conversation to have around the virtual workspace and how do we use, for instance, Teams and the indicators that says you're not available. Of course, the boundaries again, say no, and task prioritization, agree on what's reasonable working hours. The multiple communication channels is really a challenge. I had that same, experience this week where I missed emails because I just missed looking at a certain app on my phone. And then I think what I hear here is some ownership from you as a leadership team to really, leaders need to drive these boundaries and to communicate that to the team. It's very, very important that that you as a leader initiate these discussions, get your team's inputs, and then mandate it. Give permission for it to become the new routine or the way that we work. Yes, very important. Leaders must set the example of doing it. And tongue in cheek, we just in our group had the conversation that said you can even do some cheats like setting up your email to go out early in the next morning. There's a functionality in Outlook where if you push the send button, it doesn't go out to the team immediately or the person that you want to send it to. You can set it to send later. And then if you set it to go out at 8 o'clock, there is no expectation of the other person to reply to that email of yours because it's coming out or coming to them during work hours. So use the technology also to your benefit in what you communicate to your team if you really have to do something outside of working hours or outside the times that you as a team have agreed. And also very practical. If the team button is red, don't drop a chat. It's as easy as that. That is a very practical virtual rule. I can see from these responses that it's top of mind. There are things, and I would have loved to hear from you whether it's working. So you can already know that by the end of the Inner Core series, we are going to ask you again, has this made any change? Has this had any effect on the way that you work? And it would be great to hear also of examples of where you managed to manage these boundaries in a healthy way from these tips and tricks that you've gotten from your colleagues. Thank you for joining us in this session. I'm going to hand back to Andile now to close off the session for us. And thank you from my side for your participation in the Inner Core session.
Thank you, Marina, and thanks to Natasha as well for the insights that we got today. And I think just understanding more about our conscious and subconscious self has been a wonderful journey for me this week. And for those that continue to attend these sessions and that are fully present in the breakaway rooms, I've had lovely engagements today and all the other sessions we've had so far. And I saw a lovely quote this week that Brene Brown says that owning our story is the bravest thing that we will ever do. So to show up in the room and to share our experiences is very brave, and well done to you and to us for showing up every week. I look forward to using this information personally to building my own mindfulness and to improve my health and my well-being and just creating healthy boundaries. And before I go today, I'd like to encourage all of us to find a way to shut down and reboot, because we really do need it, and to avoid that burnout that Dr. Khanyile mentioned last time when we met as well. And just a reminder that we'll have our next Inner Core series on the leadership sessions on the 9th of September on a Thursday between 2 and 3:30. And until next time, remember, we are all in this together, even though we're apart. Take care. I also found this amazing quote about anxiety after Natasha's session, the core series this week. And it says, our anxiety does not come from thinking about the future, but wanting to control it. And I know that as leaders, we're constantly trying to be steps ahead and trying to control the future, but we can't. So take a day at a time and remember to breathe. Goodbye and have a lovely afternoon. Bye.